One. All right, everyone. It's been a little while. So, welcome back to the Autism Experience podcast. It's been about a month and a half. So, everybody out there in the internet knows I'm Benjamin Vabner. From now on, I will be pitching myself on this podcast as what we call an autism trainer. So, for anyone who would be interested in learning about the different levels of autism, that's going to be one of the things that I go into here and there with my storytelling on the podcast. You're welcome to find me in a couple places, and that will be LinkedIn is one place. I'm available on Instagram. I have email, a few different places to catch me. Now, tonight, my guest is actually somebody who's in the education realm. I have Maximillian Hill, who works at, what is it, CUNY Lehman?
Yep, Lehman College, City University, New York.
City University, right here in my own backyard. So, let's start out with a couple things. What was your first platform when you began your content creating journey? And what made you decide to go into content creation?
I think it was actually Instagram. And I just used their story functionality, and then got pretty active on LinkedIn, and I built up some momentum there. And I think content creation is a great way to put ourselves out there and the kinds of projects that we're working on. And our podcasting is a great way to promote your guests. In our instance, could be some of the companies that we're trying to work with.
And it's interesting enough. So my first two platforms, since we are both old enough to remember the early days of social media, back in 2004, I had a great high school experience, but it was actually quite funny. The first platform everyone wanted to get me on post-high school was MySpace. Held off for 2 years until my first job, which was at a movie theater post-high school. The people that I worked with made me the MySpace profile. So I connected with people, used it for a couple years. Then like 2 years later, around 2008, Facebook finally allowed people to have accounts that didn't go to registered colleges, which I'm sure you would have had. I'm sure you had Facebook when you first got into college, right?
I had Facebook while I was in college.
So yeah, because that's who Facebook was first, usable to.
Yeah.
And then they opened that up a couple of years later. Whether that was a good idea or not, I will not bring this onto that today. I'll leave that one up for debate. But I feel like letting everyone have an account back then might have been a good and a bad idea. So my next creating platform ended up being Facebook between 2014 and then 2020. I had two different profiles. The first one I built up to almost 1,000 friends, and then that profile got hacked after, I think it was the 2016 election or somewhere up to the 2020 election. By the 2020 election, I made one more profile, and then that one got hacked, so I just left it alone. And after that election, or the year before that, somewhere between 2020, I was on LinkedIn at the same time. I didn't use LinkedIn periodically, but I had always had that profile since 2012. Now, what were you told at university was good about being on LinkedIn?
What was I told?
Yeah, were you told to go on there because that's where people get internships?
No, I kind of just intuitively knew that was a good place to go. I mean, I had been pretty active on there before I started this kind of work, and part of my work is reaching out to tech companies that are hiring, and I already knew a great way to, I guess, get in touch with a lot of recruiters and hiring managers at these companies would be through LinkedIn. Yeah.
Interesting. So with me, I started creating content 1 year later after I was trying to figure out what you could even do with LinkedIn in the first place. My first use for LinkedIn was honestly, it was looking for internships or job opportunities, but it ended up being job opportunities. And then after about a year of trying to figure it out, I decided to first create content, but then I decided to sort of follow what I originally wanted to do. This was after I got hired, by just commenting, on several larger creators' profiles.
Yeah, it's a good way. It's a good way to get noticed if that's what you're trying to do.
That was that. Like I said, there were three different uses for LinkedIn. I feel that there are 3 or 4 uses. Use number one is obviously what everybody wants to use it for, which is job opportunities. Use number two, meeting like-minded people. Number three actually probably turned into a more interesting one because now it's a cluster, but that's another story. People are creating content and starting businesses on LinkedIn, in like what we call a 1%. First, I looked at it, I'm like, this is even possible on here? And then I started realizing once I did it myself for something else and bringing some of my old stuff over from Facebook, from like posting tactics, I just had to learn the language of LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think
LinkedIn is more professional.
A lot of people use it to find clients too for their business. I know our mutual friend Janayad, he uses it to find clients for his resume writing service. And it's a great way to kind of build your brand. If you're
we will go in for that, but first things first. All right, so where did you go to high school?
I grew up. I went to high school at West Hempstead High School on Long Island.
So that's Nassau County, correct?
Correct, Nassau County.
And what were your grades like for a school like Loyola University in Maryland? Were they actually good? Like, did you excel in certain academics?
Yeah, I had really good grades in high school. I think I graduated in like the top 10% of my class, and that was good enough to get me into college.
What was the admissions process like for Loyola? Because honestly, with me, this is where the autism sort of had some effect. It's actually quite funny because we had a very bad understanding of autism or people with neurodiverse, tendencies when we were growing up. It's changed a lot, but I would still say there's a long way to go with this because I can remember in high school being called mentally retarded when that's not what autism was. It gets into a discussion on mental health, but we're talking about a developmental disability. And between you and me, my grades when I came out of high school overall was a 2.26 overall. So I was a C. I was like literally a C to a D average student, which is interesting because if you actually look at somebody like you who you were in the top 10%, so you most likely either let me ask you this: were your parents together? Did they stay in their marriage when you were growing up?
Yeah.
So you had good family structure. That wasn't my situation. I think my family structure contributed to it a lot because a lot of what I've realized is people with higher grades probably come from better structure. I don't know if you would agree with that.
I don't know. I haven't done any research into it. I mean, it seems to make sense, but
when you did your college application, what kind of extracurricular activities would you say you did from high school that looked good on your college resume?
I was the captain and quarterback of my high school football team. I was the first chair, tenor saxophone in the jazz band, and was in National Honor Society. I was a captain of the lacrosse team. So I had, I would say, almost too many extracurriculars.
Yeah, but I bet those looked very good. I bet those looked very good, especially the fact that you were captain for 2 different teams.
Yeah, I think it definitely helped. It was a really stressful time. I think I remember there was a lot of pressure, going through, uh, I guess, specifically junior year of high school, because there was so much riding on it. But, you know,
Junior high school.
I thought I
Did
did
you
good
did you play football in college or no? You stopped after high school.
I stopped after high school. I mean, I wasn't really too big of a guy. If you want to play college football, you got to be really big. and
Well, that would be true because unfortunately, I think where I went to high school, John Jay, the only person I can remember from 2 years after I graduated who went to play major Division I was Daniel Sheeran. That
yeah,
was and that was Syracuse and UMass.
yeah, football is very competitive, and
Oh, especially at the D1 level, and you have to have height.
yeah, and it's brutally violent as well. I
Oh, of
mean,
course. Now, did you play lacrosse or no?
I did play. Uh, I played 1 year of competitive NCAA lacrosse in college, and then after that, I ended up playing like club ball, which is more, I guess, intramural, like more like relaxed, because it's less of a commitment. Because I knew I wasn't going to be a professional lacrosse player, and I wasn't getting a scholarship. I wasn't getting enough scholarship money to play.
Or do it much further, and I'm sure it also took up a lot of your life, right?
Yeah, and I mean, for me, the reason I was there was to study. It wasn't, lacrosse was a way to pay for part of it, but uh, my goal was not to be a lifelong lacrosse player.
No, because there's you don't get really many. Most people I knew who since I was involved in lacrosse and football in my high school days, I helped them manage both teams, videoed for the other. Most of those guys did go on to play major D1 college lacrosse at John Jay Cross River, but then after that, I think only one or two people went pro. Everybody else basically went into coaching.
Yeah, that's pretty much what people do. I mean, to make money as an athlete is very difficult. It's I think
Only the rare 5% are ever that good enough to go pro.
you have to be truly, truly exceptional to make money as an athlete. These,
Well, if I can remember, especially at our age, all the big names that we watched in NFL football all those years, there were not everyone could become a Ben Roethlisberger, not everyone could become an Aaron Rodgers, a Matt Leinart, a Vince Young, even and these guys, some of these guys washed out in the NFL and ended up, either doing something else or going into broadcasting.
yeah, those guys they're the cream of the crop for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what did you study in college, or what would you say your original plan was?
I studied business administration and finance in college. Uh, like many people, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and so um, I knew that business administration would be a useful major that could help me pay back some of my loans. And it was good. It helped me get a couple opportunities. One in one of the largest digital security companies in the world, and I thought I learned a lot.
Is that the one where you were a financial analyst?
Correct.
So, what skills are needed for a financial analyst exactly? Because I've looked at these job descriptions sometimes, and I've always wondered, especially because you and I are also a little older, so tech was sort of just getting known, but it's before tech exploded and became good, which was the recession. It was the field to go.
Yeah. I think if you're interested in being a financial analyst, you need to be good at math. You need to be good with analyzing spreadsheets and communicating your findings to your coworkers and your bosses, your superiors. And you really have to have an understanding of the business. So it's not just about the numbers; it's how the numbers interact within the business, and being able to communicate that, I think.
So since financial analysts are probably across many different industries, which industry would you say is the most challenging to perform that role, and in which do you think would have not necessarily looser requirements, but might not be as strict about things?
To be that's a good question. I'm not sure because I've only really been financial analyst in the digital security industry, which is, admittedly a booming industry. I think, not sure. I know every industry needs financial analysts. I think if you can have tech skills, that will help. Even if you're not working at a pure tech company, I think every company needs tech skills these days. But I don't know, as far as like industries that are more looser requirements, meaning on like the job.
They might meet you halfway and not require, for example, SSS, Python, R, some of the different, like, I trust me, I'm not full-time job seeking. Like when we met during the spring, I'm like passively doing it because what I'm more trying to do right now, maybe similar to you with my podcast, is really trying to work on my digital skills, my old video production skills. Because if I go back to high school and, early days of college, there was one thing I regret. I regretted not sticking with TV broadcasting or film production, which were my original aspirations. And, it's really interesting. It took until COVID for me to end up back in some form of this, which is a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's helped me get comfortable with technology again. And it's, given me the idea to finally say, especially with one of my two co-founders, I'm like, we wanted to do this back in like the 2008s, and then I procrastinated for too long, and now look where I ended up back in. Kind of funny if you think about it. And you're right about one thing, which is it's a good way to brand.
Yeah, it's a good way to put yourself out there for sure.
It becomes a marketing medium because, so my other co-founder, it's interesting, we talk about this periodically. As much as I have a hot take, the hot take is this. I don't necessarily believe that the degree is everything to corporate America. I just unfortunately think so many human resource departments, maybe from your own experience, want it so badly, or they don't know what they want. But I think what's important to take away from those is probably the skills that you're learning.
Yeah, I do think there are too many human resource departments that have too strict a requirement on the 4-year degree. I do agree with you. I mean,
my industry is a wreck with this. The reason, and I work in healthcare and I love the industry, don't get me wrong, but they are so strict about it just because of the fact that you're working with licensed professionals. You can't do anything without, i.e., a cert. If I wanted to go into medical billing, you need a certification. If I wanted to become any type of an analyst, I need a higher degree. It's like, I don't want to go, and then there's no guarantee of getting hired internally or externally. So it's like you're asking somebody to go leverage more money in loans
in
for
debt,
a piece
take
of
up more debt, and there's no
it doesn't make sense.
It's a problem. I mean, that's part of the reason why there's $1.7 trillion in student loan debt.
Because honestly, corporate America doesn't get clear on what they want.
Yeah.
That's what they should, and it's funny because the CTO and his name is Justin, he even said to me finally, this is what we should have been told or taught to do when we were a kid. Pick an area that you excel in. Play with it, learn it, master it. Work with it first, then go to college, because those are the people that get the jobs, people that are masters in something. Or that's at least how it works in Europe. What this country does is the opposite. They have to go to college, learn first, but then they're not going to necessarily hire you because you're not going to know anything when you're coming out of high school.
Yeah. I think a lot of times mastery starts once you actually graduate, because learning doesn't end when you're finishing school. I think now that's when mastery begins. But I mean, I think we all need to take a lifelong learning approach, because the way that technology is these days, you have to continue to learn, or else you get left behind for sure.
And you know what's really funny, because I was just having this debate with my best friend who's a licensed civil engineer. We're just arguing that this morning. They used to tell me, why are you trying to go back and spend more money at college again? And then I finally said it to him today. Artificial intelligence, buddy. This is that next innovation that unfortunately requires learning, or else, like a majority of the country, we'll get left behind if we don't go back and learn something.
Yeah, I think, lifelong learning doesn't have to be a very expensive advanced degree. I mean, it could be, but I don't think it's smart to continue to pile on more and more debt for more and more advanced degrees, because it doesn't guarantee opportunity. It depends on what your financial position is. If you can afford to drop $100,000-$200,000 on an advanced degree, then more power to you. I don't know if it's the best move to go deeper and deeper into debt. It's definitely a problem. I mean,
I think the problem is this. Okay, my business degree, for example, I have an associate's degree in marketing. I have a business administration and sports management degree. Supposedly, these are just degrees that you utilize for networking. They're not necessarily going to get you hired, because nowadays, especially, you have to be specialized in other areas. So when I finally heard that from somebody who I'm close with, who's a social worker, after he told me that, and I wasn't, talking to him on the Zoom call, I was like, oh, crap, diggity crap. So in other words, I chose something that I was good with because I liked history, and, my strengths were history and written English. I was not good with math and science like you were. Those were huge struggle areas for me, especially being on the autism spectrum. So interestingly enough, when he told me that, I'm like, oh, so basically, even though I'm a business, administrative marketing professional, because I do all this on my own, I can't get hired because now my degrees are out of date. Fantastic. So what am I supposed to do? Because like you said, this is where the argument between me and him comes. I decided to say to him one day, here's the real reason I built this up right here. If you need a marketing medium so that, people see that you're working on something. If I go to college for a degree again, they're not going to know what kind of a job, what kind of a role I'm looking for, what kind of a job I'm looking for. They're not going to know the best way to help me. I'm going to have to know what industry I want to go into. And now doing the podcast, being my own host, doing the writing, I stumbled into this. I finally, at the start, when I asked you about your content creating journey, I finally, after 2 to 3 years of doing this straight, prior to the 20 years that I wasted, and I literally say wasted, looking for a job, I fell into something that I've been able to work with consistently over time, get to a point where it's becoming mastered.
Yeah.
That's what it is, especially with, my learning disabilities. There's often the idea that besides you should be specialized, you should be pursuing something you're going to be good at. It just so turns out when I was a kid, my parents and I never knew what it was that I was going to be good at.
Mm.
And that became a problem, because now all these years later, what I found out is that, okay, I'm a skilled podcaster now. I'm skilled with social media. I'm skilled with writing. Okay, digital marketing.
Yeah, I think that it makes sense. And digital marketing is not something that requires a degree. I think schools do offer.
It would help, but it's not a necessity for me at this stage.
Yeah.
My necessity at this point, or my why, is to get comfortable.
Yeah.
So what you to get into a comfortable position where, I have an income coming in. What was the sales agency when you came out of school in Maryland?
That was the digital security company that I worked at.
So cybersecurity.
Correct.
Okay. In business, what would you say is the hardest skill for people that never worked retail to learn?
Never worked retail. I worked retail. That my first job ever was
Same
selling
here.
selling sneakers at a Foot Action. So I think one of the things I learned in retail was, you know, greeting customers, dealing with them face to face. These days, if you are in a tech business, you might not meet them in person at first. Uh, it might be, a conversation with Zoom chat or even email. I think uh, you just learned a lot about how to present yourself with working with clients closely. So I think people who didn't work in retail, they kind of lose out on that kind of experience. But I don't think working in retail is absolutely necessary to learn about.
I don't think it's a necessity, but I will tell you from being in customer service and retail for 21 years that while I agree with you on the people who don't, that there are people who don't need it that can learn the skills that you're talking about, I still have a belief that people should be pushed one time in their life to work one retail job or work in a call center once in your life so you can gain an understanding of the public.
Yeah, it's hard dealing with the public's challenging.
I do medical scheduling. I'm
Yeah.
not going to say who I do it for, but since it's like working in a call center or, when you have to do credit card collections, or credit collections or bill collections on any level, you learn some lessons about you learn lessons about people. Medical scheduling, the one thing I don't like about it, but I've been able to understand it. People take out their frustrations on somebody they can't see. When they come to the medical facility and something happened, they take it out on the front desk.
Mm.
Those are the type of people who never worked a retail job in their life that I believe missed out on at least being able to understand what it was like to, deal with somebody who's irate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard.
Go ahead.
It's hard. I've had to deal with people who are irate. I've been the irate person.
But you have more sympathy, I'm betting, by this point in your life because you did work retail.
Yeah, it's tough. It's for sure. And people on the front lines usually take the brunt of unhappy customers. I think a lot of businesses these days really have lacking customer service. I think there's definitely there's a lot of opportunity to improve the customer service experience. I think,
I would love one day to just develop, in addition to what I'm doing, which is autism trainings, customer service trainings also, because, I know there are creators that have done this before, especially on Instagram, but I do believe that on some level, especially for the non-retail worker, doing something like that might be beneficial for them.
yeah.
Especially because, if you're going into a business development role or a sales role and you've never had retail experience, how are you going to understand what you're
doing? Yeah.
All right. So since you are a podcast host, I'm interested to know what the name of your podcast is and what prompted you to want to do a podcast.
So I have two podcasts. One is called the Built in the Bronx podcast. And that's a podcast that we use to promote our students at Lehman College. And we also use it to interview representatives from tech companies that they might be interested in working at. And I guess that started when a professor at the school told me that we had a fully equipped podcast studio on campus. And I said, wow, that's definitely something we've got going for us, and we have access to an awesome podcast studio that's not going to cost us anything to get started. So
how much do those studios actually technically run? I would be interested in recording in a studio one of these days.
it depends the location, but I mean they could run as high as like $200 to $300 per hour. So I mean it could be very expensive. That's why I think Zoom chats are cost effective. And then
Well, yeah, exactly. Because I have somebody coming on next week who's a CEO, and she actually asked me, "Are we going to be doing this in a studio?" I was like, "No, we're going to be doing it on Zoom. It's just easier."
Zoom, or I mean, if you want to, you could do it in person if you have space in your house, or you could find a place to do it. I think there's a
Yeah,
lot.
but sometimes, honestly, Zoom is the easiest. I mean, I
Yeah.
actually was thinking about that, and that might be for a future collaboration with someone where maybe I invite them, over here to where I live, and then, maybe that didn't occur to me actually when I was setting up next week's guest.
Yeah. No, I think you got to be creative. I think if we had access to our studio, which was free, so we didn't have to pay for it. But if you want access to a professional studio, and you have to pay for it, it's going to be very expensive. So,
Oh, for sure.
yeah, that definitely Zoom chats become very convenient. Both
Oh, they do become convenient because I would have
time-wise.
to pay 15 and change for the Zoom license monthly. So, what is the role that you do at Lehman College, and how did you get that?
So I build relationships with companies, and we try to build hiring pipelines between our school and the company. And it's been tough because last year the software engineering job market was very difficult.
Was it saturated?
I'm sorry.
Was it oversaturated,
Yeah,
undersaturated?
there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people in trying to break into that market. Yes.
Well, unfortunately, it's because it's the only role right now that, aside from maybe analyst, that actually pays like up to high to mid six figures.
Yeah. So
So while I don't blame people for
competitive.
wanting to pursue that, it gets oversaturated at a certain point, and you can only give out so many contracts.
Yep.
I'm aware. I follow Joshua Fluke's YouTube channel. I'm aware how software engineering works. It's the most competitive field, and most of them end up on either 12-month contracts, 6-month contracts, or 3-month contracts.
Yeah.
And they're having to consistently apply. Which, I have to sit there and question. If you're going to be doing short-term contracts in that for high money, that means you're basically a periodic job seeker.
Yeah.
I don't know how people have the resilience or the mentality to do that.
I think these days,
Oh, that's right, because corporate's no longer loyal to anyone.
yeah, it's not. Yeah, so
I knew the answer. I was trying to see if you would get me onto it.
Yeah, I think jobs are just not where you have a job for 10, 20, 30 years. It's just very it doesn't often work out that way. I think the average.
I think healthcare is going to be one of those last industries that might still keep that on some level. I don't want to stay with the same company that I'm working at right now, but unfortunately, these next 4 years, I might not necessarily have a choice due to a few factors. And do my customer service skills, can they transfer to another industry or be utilized in another industry? The issue with my role is this. My role is one particular niche role in the medical field, which is scheduling by itself. But scheduling is a function of administrative assistants, and not everybody needs an administrative assistant.
Yeah.
The only other industry I could probably do administrative assistant in, where there's still probably a need for a person, but we don't know how much longer that's going to be in, is the real estate sector.
Mm-hmm.
And again, with real estate, we don't know if they're really going to need that role, because so much is now digital.
Yeah.
Or instead of overpaying somebody, instead of paying someone $60K here, you could pay a freaking VA in the Philippines less, and they'll just take whatever.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. So, but hey, Ben, I gotta go. But
no, that's fine, and I appreciate you
Yeah.
stopping by.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. Keep up the great work, and
Will do.
looking forward to seeing the episode. Okay.
All right, will do. Have
right,
a good night, my friend. All right.
All right.
All right. All right, so now I'm going to do a separate topic that I think needs to. So now that I have a couple minutes left on the record, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a little bit of a reaction about last week's election. Last week's election, unfortunately for me, was very difficult, and it was very difficult in the aspect of. It's not that I don't like Trump. I was more shocked over the amount of people that voted for him again, because we just got out of this. But unfortunately, there are a lot of factors right now that, the Democratic Party just lost a group of voters. So we will have to put up with this for the next 4 years. We will see what happens in the next 4 years, but basically that's what I wanted. That's all I wanted to say for tonight. I will definitely see you guys at the next one. All right.